guilt, shame, blame. This is like the trifecta of manipulation, especially if you're an empath, because we feel it so deeply, because we don't want anyone to be mad, because we don't want, oh my God, someone being disappointed with us. You're like, ah.
Yeah, the disappointed person, that's the worst.
Just the worst. We want to do anything to avoid that. And yet we have to learn to tolerate our feelings and to get really clear. As you're healing, as empaths, someone being upset can be enough to make us just abandon ourselves and go, okay, fine, all right, it's not a big deal. Like, we don't have to make a big deal about it. I'll do the thing, right? So I want you to be aware if you're someone who is like quick to self-abandon in those times. And you also, let's get clear about who are the guilt trippers in our lives. Because trust me, you know, I know, everybody listening knows, we know. A lot of times it's mothers, a lot of times it's old school, a lot of times there's a cultural element to it. But we still have the opportunity to not let it work. So there's a couple of things that you can say to someone. And I feel like this is appropriate, whether we feel like it's intentional or unintentional. If someone's like, well, you told me that you love that car, and so I bought that car. Now I hate that car. So I don't know why you told me to buy it. You'd be like, hey, Bob, you bought that car of your own volition, your own accord. I got nothing out of you buying that car. So I'm actually not taking this on, but I'm sorry that you're bummed out. But the words are, I'm not taking this on, or I'm not taking responsibility for your choice, right? Or someone who makes you feel bad that you have what they want. So let's say someone who gets engaged to be married and they're so excited. Yay, I got engaged. And you have a friend who's like, good for you. Too bad it's never going to be me. Right? Friend. And there are people like that who, you know, the friend who like legit can't be happy for you. They can't. Everything good that happens to you is like something bad happening to them. That's an unhealthy friend. But I feel like every person in the world has had at least one of them. If someone were to say that, you could say, hey, what I would love is if you could just be happy for me right now. Right now, my engagement is about me.
And do you actually advise to ask that of someone, even if you can predict that they're not going to be happy? Because my instinct to go, oh, they're never going to be happy. If I say this out loud, they're just going to dismiss it. And now I actually feel worse about myself. So in this situation, maybe depending on the person, I wouldn't say it.
It depends on how close you are. Yeah. Because if it's someone who you want to have a close relationship with, then I would say to them, not in a moment of great joy, of my own great joy, but I would, at a different moment, maybe we're out to lunch, I have to be honest with you. I hesitate to tell you good things that happen in my life because a lot of times your response is that you're sad it's not you. So I feel like it can never really be about me, and it bums me out. I feel like it's coming between us. So I wonder if you'd be willing to work on that or think about that. Now, will they be mad? Will they be like, oh my God, I can't do anything right, or whatever? Who knows what? People can be defensive, and you can say, I see that you're feeling defensive about this. I understand. And yet, this was a hard conversation for me to initiate with you. And I did it because I love you. And it would have been so much easier to not, which is what I've been doing. But I feel like if I keep not having the real conversation with you, I'm not going to want to be friends.
Isn't one of your quotes something like, if you have something to say, by not saying it, it's a lie?
Like omission.
Yes.
Yes. Listen, omission is a kind of a lie, you know? And when I say omission, I don't mean if your girlfriend, your friend, your pal gets a bad haircut, right? I'm not saying, you know.
Just be like, that looks fucking ugly.
Yes, that's awful. So I don't believe in like brutal honesty.
Right,
unless my friend says, honestly, what do you think? You know what? Honestly, you're beautiful either way. I like it a little longer better. There's a way that we can be kind. I'm not saying you have to lie.
Right.
But when we're talking about omission, we're talking about omitting important things, right? Omitting things that actually change. You know, if someone has a child with someone else and you think that they're in a monogamous relationship with you and they have children with you, them not telling you, that's a big omission, which is a lie, right? Meaning you built your relationship on a lie, you know? So I think that in being able to have the conversation, even though it's hard, and some people can tolerate it and some people can't. But again, how they receive it is not your side of the street. Your side of the street is being healthy enough and loving yourself enough to be like, I don't want to be in a relationship with this friend who I can never tell them the good things that happen in my life because they're actually jealous of every good thing. That's like a selfish person. And maybe they could step it up and be less selfish. And maybe they literally are clueless about how the way they are is impacting and hurting you. And so it is so loving to be honest in that way, even though they may not feel it in the moment. They may not feel like it's so loving. But the truth is it is, because it's so much easier just to ghost people, just to be monumentally busy, just to like never make plans with that person anymore. But maybe there's something valuable in that friendship for you. And I promise you, asserting yourself, asserting your truth, unless the person is actually toxic, unless they can never hear it, unless we know that they're a narcissist, right? We don't want to make, speaking of manipulation, if we have evidence that the person we're talking about has no capacity for self-reflection, no interest in taking responsibility for what is their side of the street, that is someone who, in my book, is truly toxic. So I do not want people making themselves vulnerable to that type of manipulative personality because it's dangerous. Because the more that person knows about you, the more they're going to use it against you. So we're really talking about two kinds of relationships. The ones where there's hope, where we can work something out. And in all of those relationships, there's manipulation or attempts to manipulate. Even in healthy relationships, right? But if I'm negotiating with my husband, I'm doing it honestly. So that's not manipulation. I'm trying to persuade him. He wants to have this for dinner. I'm like, please, I really want pizza. Let's do that. You said last week we get like, that's not the same as manipulation. That's honest negotiation, which is different because our cards are on the table. He's trying to get his need met. I'm trying to get my need met. That's life. That's a long-term relationship. You need to be able to do that. But the difference is that with manipulation, we are hiding our true motive under guilt, shame, blame, fake concern, lying, love bombing, gaslighting, right? All of those things.
Dude, that was so freaking strong because as you were talking, I was like, look, some of the stuff we're going over, I've done to other people before, not meaning it to be a form of bad manipulation. And so even with talking about everything, I'm like, oh wow, I've actually said that to someone before. Why did I say it like that? Was I trying to manipulate him? And it was like, oh, maybe I was trying to manipulate him, not in an evil way, right? So I'm like processing everything in my head and then going, but I don't feel like I'm a toxic person. So thank you. That was literally going to be my question of like, how do you start to decipher what is a learned behavior that maybe you've seen from your siblings, your parents, and so you just mimic that behavior because you know it works. You don't think of it as being a manipulation tool.
Yeah.
But now with everything we're saying, I think the realities and revealing that is really strong. But then comparing that to someone that absolutely means it, is doing it to, as a controlling mechanism, as a power play, as pulling the wool over your eyes, as being that controlling person. Yeah. So that differentiator makes all the sense. And I'm exactly with you. I like to say to my husband, I openly manipulate him. Like, that's just the words we use. But I'm like, I have no qualms. Like, babe, if you do this, I'll give you some nookie. Right? Like, right. It's like joke, no joke. I think that that's healthy in a relationship in the sense if you can be transparent and honest about it. Because I'm not shy about it. I'll be like, all right, babe, well, what do you want? Like, right. And it works for us, but there's no deceiving.
Exactly. So it's not manipulation, right? If there's transparency, it's not manipulation.
Right.
I think that the pain points for so many of my clients around this is for themselves. Like if we're looking in, if we're doing self-reflection work around where are you not being straight? Where are you trying to get a need met through passive-aggressive means, through guilt, through manipulation? Because listen, none of us are perfect. And most of us have no model for being direct and asking for what you need and being straight, telling the truth. We really don't, because it's considered, in many cultures, being direct is considered rude, right? It's considered being caustic or like too bossy or like too brazen.
Well, the Brits, exactly that.
Oh my God, the worst. So bad. I mean, Americans would be considered very direct if we're looking at the cultures.
Right, yeah, cultures.
I mean, except not in the South. So not in the South, because in the South of the US, they've gotten passive-aggressive communication down to a science.
Really?
Yes. If you want to say something bad about someone, if you want to say someone is a hot mess, if you want to say they're like a stupid moron, you're like, bless his heart. Bless his heart is never about blessing anything. People from the South, you know what I'm talking about. You know it.
I do that as well, though. If I've got nothing nice to say, I'm like, bless. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, it is a way to not be cruel or mean, but not be silent.
I will actually say bless and release.
Oh.
Because that feels good to me. Like, I don't have to have a bad feeling about this person. I don't like this thing I just heard about them, or I don't agree with them, but I'm releasing it because it's not my side of the street and I don't need to agree with them, right? They can just go. But for the rest of us, if you've got a parent, you're a grown adult, and you've got a parent who guilts you, who's constantly giving you advice that you don't want to take, who's constantly trying to get you to do things you don't want to do. Take family vacations, come home and be home for Christmas for 10 days, or whatever the thing is. You have to decide how you're going to handle that, because that guilt can be very effective, right? It can work. I never want, even now, I feel like my mother's pretty healthy. She's 85, but I don't want her to be disappointed in me. But I also realize a lot of times it's the little child in me. Like, it's not what my mother's doing now.
Right.
It's how I felt as a kid. And so I'll stop myself and say, this is ridiculous. You do not have to go above and beyond if whatever, I was traveling and she wanted to see me on a Sunday and I was going to get no sleep. It's okay to say no and give myself permission. A lot of times if I feel like I'm being quote unquote manipulated, even if I'm manipulating myself unconsciously, I'll go, but I'll be resentful. Just checking a box, just getting it done. So I think with guilt, shame, and blame, we just have to be really aware of who are the people in our lives who do that. And do we do that? Even with like germ blaming, it's so funny. Like, I have friends and I love them, but they'll be like, I definitely got the cold from so-and-so's kid who was, and I'm always like, why are you like tracking? It's like a storm tracker. You're tracking the germs, where they came from. I have no friggin' idea.
The reason why I love it, I do that. I'm like, it was so-and-so, and they freaking sneezed, and then they touched the handle, and then I touched the freaking handle, and I'm like, and then literally I go into hyper, like, you're not allowed in the house for 2 weeks. Like, I do go extreme. Help me, Terry.
I don't know why. I just always felt, before the pandemic, I was like, I really had low tolerance for my germ-phobic friends. Then the pandemic, of course, they got very validated in being germ-phobic. Everyone was like, we're all germ-phobic now.
What you got now, Terry?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, you don't want to, am I still a germ tracker? I'm like, you are, but now I understand why it's a good reason to be. But here's the thing. We have to understand the human element of, why does it make us feel better to know?
It's true.
Because it's something we can't control, even in our best efforts. And so there is an illusion of control if we track the germs. So we do everything we can control. We wash our hands, we use the stuff, we do all the things, mask up on a plane, whatever, even now, because there seems to be more of it coming out. And so there's an illusion of control.
Yeah. And so as we're talking about the control factor, the manipulation, I think, for me at least, is when I start to sense, is this a manipulation? Like that almost is worse for me than not realizing I'm being manipulated, because it's the turmoil. Like, so you were talking about it earlier and you alluded to it with the gaslighting, right? Where it's like, it makes you think like you're going freaking crazy.
Yep.
And that idea of, am I losing my mind? Have I imagined it? Like, puts you on your back heel, which then makes me feel out of control, which then makes me question everything.
Yep. Here's the thing, though. If we start to identify with our red flags and doing our inventory, you're going to see a pattern of, who do I feel this way with? Who do I question my reality with? There will be a pattern, because if someone is gaslighting you, it's going to be the same people who are the real manipulators in your life. So you can sort of soothe yourself by being like, here's the pattern. It is my mother-in-law. It is my mother, my Bobbin County, I don't know, whoever it is, that I have these experiences with where I always seem to somehow get what they said wrong. Why is it only with Bob in accounting that I can't seem to get it together and remember accurately what happened? So is that me? Or is that, now I see a pattern, because if it's not happening in other relationships. So part of it is, we must be mindful. And it's important to have friends that you can talk to who you trust, to say, remind me of this. I've had the same conversation with my mother-in-law 4 times, where she tells me I agreed to do something and play games over a weekend with her friends that I swear to God I did not say I would do. And now she's holding me to it, but I didn't even agree to it. Remind me that this happened, because I have this tendency to forget. I'm going to do it this time, but I'm not doing it the next time. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really good if we can have an accountability buddy, especially if you feel like this is something that happens readily or regularly with certain people in your life. That is something to investigate.
Yeah, because I think that that's so important to actually say out loud. Thank you. In that, I don't just always want to assume it's the other person, right? Maybe it is something with me that I always have an issue with a guy in accounting. Yeah. And in fact, wasn't there the story of one of your clients where they would keep complaining about all the female in accounting or something? Yep. And then you asked her the question, who does this remind you of?
Yes. And it was her bully sister.
Yeah.
So she was repeating that relationship. And that was her side of the street.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's super powerful, because I don't ever want to be like, oh, it's always them. I'm always asking myself, how is my involvement in this? Is there anything I could have done differently or better? And that isn't to beat myself up. That is always to try and improve.
Yes.
And so with that story with this female, where you asked her and she said, oh, it's my bully sister. That's a great example of someone now that may go, oh, it's always this person that does this. They're manipulating me. They're always trying to trick me. I've got my own back. But actually, maybe it's something that you've held on to that you haven't realized.
Yes, but how you can realize it. So if you see this pattern, the pattern that you just described, you can ask yourself those 3 questions for clarity, which will help you see if you're repeating something that's unresolved from your past. So, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how is this behavioral dynamic, the way we're interacting, how is that familiar to me? So those answers to those questions, you may find that you're blaming your boss for being like a judgmental, cold jerk. You may ask those questions. Who does this person remind me of? And you'll be like, oh my God, reminds me of my judgmental, cold father. Where have I felt like this before? All of my childhood. How is this familiar to me? Me trying to get that person's approval, them withholding their approval. Why does it matter that we get those answers? So let's say you discover that you're repeating something from the past, an unresolved, painful wound that you may have. What matters is there's also the adult you. When you reveal that, you're like, oh my gosh, my boss is not my father. I'm not 10. Wow, I was really having an amplified response to this person. But now that I have a choice, now that it's in my conscious mind, I'm going to remind myself that my boss is not my father. And I'm going to relate to my boss as the accomplished professional that I am, not seeking their approval, but seeking on my merit, right? I'm going to be doing well in this company because of what I contribute, not because I'm looking at them like my father. Now, that might sound convoluted. I hope that it was straightforward enough for people to get, because it is so powerful when you use this tool of understanding where you're having what's called a transference, which means that you are in current day, in modern time, right now, in this present moment, you are reacting to a situation that is similar or reminds you of something that is unresolved from the past. That impacts how you are in this present moment. So exactly like you shared about my client who always had a conflict with someone at work, we called it her work arch enemy, and she was so convinced that it was them. And I'm not saying those people were not jerky. Maybe they were, I don't know. But all I know is that the way she was experiencing it was about an unresolved wound in her. When we ask these three questions, who does that arch enemy at work remind you of? Where have you felt like this before? How is it familiar? She was able to go, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. It is my sister. I'm relating to these people like they actually are my sister. I have no patience for them. I'm so frustrated. I see them as bullies. But are they? Or is it me? And once we resolved that original injury, what is so interesting is that all of that conflict just dissolved into the ether for her. So there's power in knowing what we might be having an amplified response to because of something that needs our attention within us.
If you enjoyed that video, then make sure to click right here for the full episode.
When they can make you doubt yourself, doubt your reality, you are so much more malleable and controllable within the relationship. So this is why it's a clever